I thought I was just stopping by my parents' house to surprise them one weekend. Instead, a front door opened to be answered by a stranger. And in one simple sentence, my whole childhood basically crumbled under me. I need to start at the beginning, or you're going to think I'm dramatic. And perhaps I was some. Possibly. But if you've ever had a space that's felt like an extension of your bones, the scent, the sound, the actual corners of it, you'll get why this shattered me the way it did. So, the house. Our house. My parents moved in 2 years prior to my birth. It wasn't upscale. It wasn't one of those sprawling suburban McMansions with a 3-car garage and granite countertops. No, it was this ordinary little 2-story house on a cul-de-sac where each house had its own somewhat eccentric charm. Ours was a pale yellow, which sunburned to more of a warm cream by the time I was 10. We had squeaky green shutters and a front porch that always ran slightly askew so that if you placed a marble on the floor, it would roll with great drama down towards the stairs. The magic, however, was inside. That's where I grew up. The kitchen forever smelled of cinnamon because my mom was a baking addict, and no batch of cookies or banana bread ever truly cooled before one was pilfered by my dad. I can still hear the rattle of that old ceiling fan in the living room circulating that smell every weekend. The second step of the staircase creaked painfully like it had arthritis. Truthfully, my entire childhood pretty much was spent trying to tiptoe around that sound when I believed I was sneaking downstairs in the evening. I adored that house. And here's the thing, my parents loved it too. Or I think they did. They would say things like, "This house has good bones, and it'll be yours someday, you know. We'll pass it down." They'd say it casually while sipping coffee at that rickety kitchen table, but the words got in me deep. I swallowed them whole. And I trusted them. They'd never promised me fancy cars, jewelry, or even big family vacations. But they had promised me the house. Not in a formal, signed piece of paper type of way, but in that soothing parent type of way that makes you think, okay, this is something I can count on. So fast forward to when I went away to college. College was 3 hours away. Close enough to visit from time to time, distant enough that it was my own tiny world. I was the first in my family to go off like that, and my parents were trying so hard helping me furnish my dorm, shopping with me, giving me speeches about independence. You know the drill. But whenever I called home, or when we FaceTimed from my tiny dorm room, I always asked, "How's the house?" And they would smile, say it was the same as always, that Dad was cleaning out the gutters, or Mom was reorganizing her spice cabinet for the 10th time. It made me feel rooted, to know that place was just sitting there, waiting, glowing like a night light in the back of my mind when everything else was new and nuts. But then there started to be little hints. They'd say something in conversation that wouldn't quite add up. So my mom was like, "Oh, we've been going through boxes in the attic." And she laughed it off, kind of, but I was like, "Why? What boxes?" And she said something about cleaning, decluttering, Marie Kondo-ing things. That was plausible enough, but something in her tone, it didn't sound so much like casual spring cleaning as urgency. And then one evening, my dad phoned me and asked me how I enjoyed city living. Only I didn't actually live in the city at college. It was in this exact leafy suburban setting. I figured he was just mixed up. So I said, "Dad, it's not the city." And he laughed uncomfortably and switched topics. Brushed it off. I mean, don't parents get weird when the children leave the nest? But here's where things got creepy. I began to dream about the house. Dreams that I'd come in and all the furniture was missing. Or worse, dreams where another family was just living there, using our kitchen, watching television in our living room like it was always their own. I'd wake up disturbed, but I never spoke up because it sounded so silly. So when spring semester rolled around, I was eager to do something thrilling. Instead of informing my parents that I was coming home for a weekend, I decided to surprise them. 3 hours in the car, music blaring, windows down despite the fact that it was still officially chilly outside, just me buzzing with the excitement of showing up on the doorstep and being able to watch their faces light up. I practiced what I was going to say. I consider everything, don't judge me. Something casual like, "Hey, just thought I'd drop by," or dramatic like, "Did you miss me?" I even stopped at the town bakery to buy a box of those ridiculous sprinkle-covered cookies my mom loved. I pictured us sitting at the kitchen table as always, her breaking 2 cookies in half so they'd last longer, my dad sneaking one anyway like an old comedy routine I never grew tired of. I made a turn onto our street. The cul-de-sac was usual. Children's bikes would sometimes be sprawled over driveways, sprinklers on. When I finally drove into our driveway, I paused. It seemed rather too quiet. The curtains on the front window were different. Ours had been those old faded beige ones my mom always said she would replace but never did. But now, these bright blue curtains. I blinked at them. Maybe she finally got new ones. I parked, cradling the bakery box in my arms like treasure, and climbed the tilted porch stairs which groaned softly as always beneath my feet. My heart was pounding with excitement. I knocked once lightly at the door, then again more loudly. The door opened. And it wasn't my mom. It wasn't my dad. It was a woman I had never seen, with a baby on her hip. She smiled nicely, though a bit confused. "Can I help you?" My brain wouldn't process for a second. I thought maybe she was a friend of my mom's, babysitting or something. Except this wasn't what our front hallway looked like. It smelled different, cleaner, maybe, and the carpet was new. Beige and fluffy where ours had been worn flat. I stuttered, hi, this is my house, and immediately felt how crazy I sounded. She cocked her head in sympathy. "Oh, you must be the daughter of the previous owners. The Browns, correct? They sold the house to us a few months back." My hold on the cookie box faltered. It fell, the lid flying off, cookies spilling out across the slanted porch step like flags of surrender. And I could do nothing but stand there, immovable, as strangers stood in the doorway of my home. There's this odd thing your mind does when it's hit with something it doesn't want to think about. It thinks of every single explanation except for the one that's most obvious. So I just stood there, staring at this stranger woman in my doorway. The doorway where my mom would stand and wave goodbye to me on school mornings. I just kept thinking, oh, maybe they're renovating? Maybe my parents are renting it out? Maybe I'm literally dreaming again and need to wake up. I laughed nervously, a goofy, crackly laugh. "No, I think you must be wrong this. This is our home. I grew up here." My parents' dash, she shook her head, bounced the baby on her hip as if I were some pesky door-to-door salesman. Her voice was nice, but there was finality too. "I'm so sorry, hon. We purchased the home in December. The Browns relocated a couple towns away, I believe." "Are you all right?" "Moved. They moved." I managed to grunt something like, "Yeah, I'm fine," when I was anything but fine and staggered backward down the porch steps. The cookies were still open on the wood, sprinkles bleeding into the cardboard where one had been smashed, but I didn't even take them. I just turned, got back into my car, and shut the door behind me. For a full minute, I sat there gripping the wheel with both hands like I was in some kind of simulator. All these questions shot through me rapid fire. When did they sell it? Why didn't they tell me? Where were they? Why wasn't I worth a phone call at the very least? I eventually began driving my car since the woman was still there looking out, clearly checking to see if she'd inadvertently destroyed my life. Spoiler, she had. The entire ride back to school is a haze of highway signs and tears. I sobbed so profusely I was concerned that somebody would spot me through the windshield and believe my life just ended. Which, in a manner, part of it had. See, I know they say home is where the heart is. Cute, catchy, Instagram-worthy. But to me, home wasn't some idea. It was tangible. It had walls I'd measured my growing height on, hardwood floors my dog scratched when he slid running after toys, a closet where I hid letters from old friends, and a dent in the living room wall from when I'd once thrown a Wii remote too hard. You can't just relocate that. You can't copy it. And my parents, my own parents, sold it without a word to me. The night after I discovered it, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my dorm bed looking at the ceiling tiles, phone gripped in my hand like a lifeline. I kept unlocking it, scrolling to Mom's cell and Dad's cell, then locking it again. What would I even say? "Hey, thanks for selling the one thing you swore to me my whole life. Hope you got a good deal?" But eventually, at around 2:30 in the morning, I broke. I called my mom. She answered on the third ring, her voice sleepy. "Sweetheart? Is something wrong?" That question punched me in the gut. Was something wrong? Technically, as far as she was concerned, perhaps not. But to me, everything was wrong. My voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me you sold the house?" There was a pause. I could literally hear her wake up, the sheets rustling as she sat up. Oh, honey. The worst two-word phrase you can hear when you're seeking an explanation. She started speaking carefully, like one might disarm a bomb. "We did not want to worry you. You've been working so hard at school. And the reality is, it all took place so rapidly. The market was good, and one thing led to another." I interrupted, "But you promised. You always said the house would be mine someday." My voice broke on mine, and I despised the way I sounded like a child. A child refusing to give up a toy. But it wasn't that, it was about trust. Family legacy. Roots. My mom let out a sigh so deep it hummed through the phone speaker. I know, baby. I know we said that. But things change. The house was old, it needed work, and your dad and I, we just felt like it was time for a fresh start. Fresh start. Those two words fell like bricks on my chest. A fresh start for them, which evidently meant demolishing my foundation. I whispered tearfully, so you lied. There was a silence again. Then, in a soft voice, she said, we didn't lie. We meant it when we said it. At the time. But we didn't expect life to become the way it did. I hung up before I could hear anymore. The following day, I got a call from my dad. I didn't pick up. He left a message saying he needed to explain that I should visit them at their new place sometime. And in a rush of betrayal and pain, I deleted it without hearing the rest. Because how do you just do that? Move on like that? Box your stuff, give the keys to strangers, and call it starting fresh? I wandered campus half alive for weeks. My friends teased me, invited me to eat, dragged me to late-night study groups, and I'd smile and laugh when I was supposed to. But inside, it was like someone had torn up the floorboards in my life and left me dangling, suspended over nothing. One evening, my roommate point-blank asked me, "Are you all right? Somebody broke your heart." And I laughed because, yeah, somebody did. Just not in the way she was thinking. My heart wasn't broken by a crush or a breakup. It was broken by the two people I thought I could trust unconditionally. I couldn't quit replaying that porch scene over and over in my mind like a movie titled The Day Everything Changed. The woman's polite voice. The baby wobbling on her hip. Me spilling the cookies my mom would never eat. And that's when a whole new kind of horror dawned on me. She said they sold it in December. It was April when I got there. That meant my parents had 4 months, for entire months, to tell me, and they didn't. They phoned me for Christmas. They FaceTimed me on my birthday. They asked me about my classes, my grades, my friends, and not once did the words, "By the way, we sold the house," cross their lips. It was not just the house. It was the fact that they let me think they were there all that time, going through routines that were not being gone through anymore. They built an illusion for me. And the illusion broke when a stranger opened the front door. I wish I could say I confronted my parents immediately, like some sort of action movie heroine who bursts into Act 3 with all the outraged fury of betrayal. But I didn't. I avoided them. I avoided their calls, their texts, their emails. I wasn't ready to hear asterisk their side. Because internally, I already knew what it would be: sensible, reasonable, grown-up sounding explanations that would make me feel like I was overreacting. Something like, the taxes were too high, the plumbing was destroyed, we couldn't afford the renovations. All sense. All logical. But none of that changes the fact that my childhood home, my anchor, was gone. So I put the sorrow in a box inside me, the way they'd put cardboard boxes in some moving truck I never saw. I went to class, ate food, hung out with friends, but I also found myself walking differently. Like, more carefully, more cautiously. Because the world had tipped a little bit, and I wasn't quite sure where to step anymore. And then one weekend, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I was on Instagram, procrastinating on homework, when I came across somebody's post geotagged from my old neighborhood. They'd taken this artsy photo of their dog bounding down the sidewalk of the cul-de-sac, and there, as clear as day, in the background, was my house, or the exterior of it, at least. Only it wasn't the house I recollected. They'd painted it gray. Gray. My vibrant, sun-baked yellow childhood home had been lost under this dull, contemporary sheen. Even the shutters were gone. I stared at the picture so hard my eyes hurt. The caption actually said, "Love our new neighbors down the street." And my throat just closed, because that was it. That was the physical proof that someone else now lived there for good. That another family's laughter would fill those walls, cover every hint of mine. I fell apart. I went for a drive that night. Nowhere in particular, just away. Down dark suburban streets and freeways where the only illumination was from gas stations or radiating fast food signs. I white-knuckled the wheel and tensed every muscle in my shoulders until they shrieked in protest. I said out loud to myself, it's not about the walls. It wasn't about paint or curtains or creaking stairs. My voice was thin, like I didn't even expect to believe me. Because what it was really about, what weighed monstrously heavy in my chest, was the sensation that a promise had been torn off. Do you ever notice your parents are actually human and hurt? I think I'd always known, abstractly, that they weren't perfect. But this was the first time they didn't just forget to pick me up or scold me unfairly. This was the first time they knowingly, deliberately kept a choice from me. And the thing is, it would have still hurt if they had told me beforehand. But at least then, it would have been honest. I'd have had time to grieve with them. Time to help sort boxes, to walk through each room one last time. To say goodbye. Instead, they took even that away. Finally, after weeks of silence, my dad showed up on campus. It was unreal. He messaged me out of nowhere. Here on a surprise visit. You free for lunch? And before my mind had a chance to catch up with my bitterness, my fingers betrayed me with a yeah, meet you at the student center. I recall how he approached me with his large backpack slung over his shoulder like some careless tourist. It's seeing a stranger who is familiar. His face creased into this smile of relief, like, my little girl, long time no see, but I remained rigid. We sat in a noisy corner of the cafeteria. He ordered a burger, I barely touched a salad. And at last he got to the point. Look, he started, softening his tone. I know you're upset. And I understand. You have every right to feel the way you do. But your mom and I, we were trying to protect you. We didn't think you'd want to bear the burden of all of that while attempting to settle into college. I snapped out, that's my whole point. You decided what I could or couldn't handle. Without even talking to me. He swallowed, nodded once. You're right. We should have spoken up earlier. I regret how we did it. But then came the part he must have rehearsed, the logical justification. The heating bills were outrageous. The roof needed work. The neighborhood wasn't great anymore. They wanted somewhere quieter, easier. We're not getting any younger, he said with a smile that did not belong in that conversation. I just looked at him, getting teary-eyed even though I did not wish to cry in public. At last, I whispered, you promised that house to me, Dad. Don't you understand? You didn't just sell wood and nails, you sold me out of my own childhood. He did not reply immediately. He massaged his temples, sighed, and then whispered softly, we thought we are smart for doing this. I didn't know this was a form of betrayal. That was the first time he used that particular word, betrayal. Like acknowledging the crack in the glass between us. But in that instant, I understood something that surprised me. He genuinely didn't believe this would hit me like it did. To my mom and him, it was just a house. A roof over their heads, nothing more. And to me, everything. I didn't feel better after that talk. But I felt clearer. I started to process this odd dual truth. 1. My parents weren't malicious on purpose. They were just practical. Blinded by dollars, logistics, adult life burdens. 2. But also, my pain was still real. Because promises matter. Memory matters. And trust matters most of all. Those weeks turned into months. I never did see the inside of the new house they bought. I didn't want to. It would have been like cheating on all the rooms that made me. So, one summer vacation afternoon, I finally returned to the cul-de-sac. Not to storm the porch again, already learned that lesson, but to simply sit in my car across the street. The gray paint glared in the afternoon sun. Kids I didn't recognize rode scooters along the sidewalk. There was a minivan parked in the driveway where our old beat-up Honda had sat. It wasn't mine anymore. Not the house, not the memories it held. At least, not in the way I believed it was. Because as I sat there, I realized something. No one could retouch the walls in my memory. No one could rip out the stairs in my memory. No one could cut the connection between me and the smell of cinnamon cookies or the groan of that rheumatic stare. That was mine. Forever. Maybe the house wasn't mine anymore. But home still was in me. That was the beginning of my gradual emotional breakdown transforming into something else. Not acceptance yet, but an acknowledgement. I didn't stop missing it. I didn't stop feeling a searing pain every time I thought about what I'd lost. But for the first time, I realized I wasn't utterly powerless. My parents sold the building, but they couldn't sell the heart. And maybe one day, I'd build or buy a house of my own where promises could be kept. That trip to the cul-de-sac, that quiet vigil sitting in my car staring at what used to be mine, wasn't closure exactly. It was more like setting down a brick I'd been carrying on my chest. I did not burst the new owner's porch again. I did not knock. I did not try to look in windows even though something in me yearned to see what they'd made of the dining room, if my corner still felt cozy. I just sat, hands on the wheel, heart slow beating with grief, but also with this slowly breaking understanding. It was no longer my house. And I was helpless to change that. But I still had control over what that place would mean to me in the future. When I finally reversed out of the cul-de-sac, I drove for hours with nowhere to go. The roads merged together in never-ending strips through farm fields and small towns. The radio was low, background noise. I wasn't trying to shut out the thoughts now, I let them spill. I remembered being 6 and sitting cross-legged in the living room, holding drawings up to my parents excitedly. I remembered being 10 and getting onto roller skates, crashing spectacularly into the hallway wall, leaving a dent that was never fixed. I remembered twirling around in front of the bedroom mirror before prom, tripping over my shoes and laughing until my mascara smeared. Those moments weren't going with the house. They were mine. And somewhere during that drive, I quit crying. By the time summer ended and I returned for the fall semester, things with me and my parents were strained, but not irrevocably so. I wouldn't say we were joking on the phone every evening, but I began to take their calls again. Largely brief ones, updates, I'm fine, classes are good, stilted exchanges with uncomfortable pauses, but at least we were communicating. Then there was Thanksgiving, and they invited me to come to their new house. I hated the idea. I did not want to see their new life. I did not want to be sitting in some new living room pretending it was fine. But my roommate nudged me a little, like, they're still your parents. Even if you're angry, go. So I went. And truthfully, approaching their new front door, this newly painted beige colonial house with a well-manicured lawn, was betrayal all over again. It wasn't home. It wasn't ours. It was just some staged Pinterest photo they'd moved into. I rang the doorbell, and my mom opened the door with this wary smile, nervous but friendly. Behind her stood my dad, stuffing a turkey, looking way too cheerful. They welcomed me in as if I were a guest in their Airbnb. And maybe that's exactly what I was. There was the scent of food, but it didn't include cinnamon. The floor didn't creak, the stairs didn't groan. Everything was too smooth, too new. At first, I hated it. My chest tightened, and I almost turned the car around to head back to campus. But then my mom gave me an apron, my dad performed a goofy jig with a carving knife, and piece by piece the ache subsided. For despite the different walls, people remained the same. It took a while to admit that, out loud or to myself. But then I realized something important. If I clung too tightly to the house, I'd lose the family. We sat down to Thanksgiving dinner that night, and in the middle of passing mashed potatoes, my mom reached across the table, her eyes misty. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "I am so sorry. We should have told you earlier. We should have allowed you to say goodbye. We know now how much that house meant to you." Something broke in me hearing her say that. A mix of relief, that she finally understood, and sorrow, that it was too late. But instead of shutting down, I whispered back, "It was like you erased me. Like you didn't think of me when you made that choice." My dad put his fork down, nodded seriously. "We did think of you. We just figured we were sparing you. But we were wrong. We didn't realize how much it all meant." And in that moment, the anger I'd been gripping so tightly loosened. They weren't monsters. They weren't villains. They were just people, flawed, imperfect, trying but failing in this really hurtful, clumsy way. We can love people and still be shattered by them. Both can exist. As time went on, I began to establish new rituals in their new home. Bringing the sprinkle cookies Mom adored into the immaculate kitchen, even though it would never have the same scent. Assisting Dad in repairing his new rickety chair, since apparently furniture instability is something we carry with us wherever we go. Placing pictures of us, our family, on their walls. The pain never dissipated. If anything, sometimes it still blindsides me. Like if I'll have a dream about my childhood bedroom or drive past my childhood street and receive this metaphysical gut punch in the chest. But instead of drowning in that sadness, I learned to say, that was then. And it was beautiful. And nothing can ever take it away. And I learned something else, something perhaps my parents didn't even intend to teach me. I don't want my own children, someday, to be blindsided like that. When I have a family, if I ever do make promises, even idle ones, I'll be serious about those words. Because idle to an adult can mean the world to a child clinging to them. The truth is, the house was never really about beams and bricks. It was about belonging. Being safe enough to assume a place was yours forever. Losing it taught me something devastating, but also strangely liberating. Nothing physical is permanent. Not a house. Not furniture. Not even the layout of your childhood bedrooms. But permanence resides elsewhere, in the sense that evoke memory, in the tiny family traditions we continue, in the stories we pass on. It took a while, but the house did become mine. Not in the deed and title sense, but in ownership of memory. Because no other person knows that on rainy days the roof would drip precisely by the third tile in the kitchen. No one else knows that in the backyard, if you dug 6 inches close to the tree, you'd reach a jar of letters my best friend and I buried as children. No one else recalls the spot on the wall where my math awards used to hang, crookedly, until the tape pulled the paint off. Those aren't theirs. Those are mine. Always mine. So now, when other people ask about home, I smile to myself inwardly. Because yes, home was a house that was painted yellow with crooked stairs. But home is also inside of me. It moves with me. And someday, I'll create a new one. A place where promises don't disappear with a real estate transaction. A place where walls may creak, roofs may leak, curtains might fade, but the belonging inside them stays. That's my resolution. And to anyone who is reading, maybe you have lost a house, or had someone you trusted disappoint you, or felt that gut punch when what you believed was forever turned out to be temporary, please hear this. It hurts, and it will hurt for a very long time. But the memories you have are unconquerable. They cannot be bought, painted over, renovated, or expunged. They are yours. They are you. So yeah, the house is gone. But the story? The story is mine. And maybe sharing it now is just another way of clinging. If you've ever had anything like this happen, I'd truly love to hear about it in the comments. And if this story resonated with you even a little bit, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell.